Hello, thank you for joining us. This is the Miro Consulting webinar on SAMOSA Act compliance requirements. We're going to begin the webinar in just a few moments. We're going to give everyone a chance to log in. You know how it goes. Time to go to a meeting, and the more important the meeting, the more likely your computer decides it needs to update Zoom, or it needs to restart, or your earphones decide not to work. We've all been there. So we're going to give it just another 30 seconds or so to give everybody a chance to get logged in, get updated, get plugged in, all those wonderful things. All right, let's get started. So this is the Miro Consulting webinar on SAMOSA Act compliance requirements. We're going to talk about what those requirements are, what are the goals of the Act, what's the current legal status, and how you should prepare. If you are someone who is working at a government agency, who is responsible or who has been given the responsibility for SAMOSA Act compliance, or you probably are here because you want to see what are those requirements going to look like, and you're one of those types of people who wants to get ahead of things and not wait to get rushed at the last minute. And I applaud you for that, because one of the things we're going to point out to you is that when acts like this pass, there is a mad rush for expertise and firms that can do this sort of thing. And if you wait until the last minute, you're going to get high prices, lesser skilled people to help you. So it's always good to get out ahead of these things. And that's why we're doing this today, to help you understand what you need to know about SAMOSA. Real quick, I just want to let you know who we are so you understand who's giving you this information. We're Miro Consulting. We are the leading global provider of software asset management and subscription management services for Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, and Salesforce. And we specialize in license management, audit advisory, negotiation tactics, support management, and cloud services. And I can tell you, when it comes to stuff like the SAMOSA Act, it's requiring federal agencies to do what commercial private entities have done for a very long time now, in terms of managing their software assets and their subscriptions. So we're one of the types of firms that helps commercial clients do this. So we also help. We've helped a number of federal agencies, state agencies, cities do this same sort of thing. And one of the great things about working with us is we have a price guarantee. Excuse me, we have a performance guarantee. So what that means is we're going to save you more money than the cost of our fees. And that's our guarantee we make. That makes it so there's no risk at working with us. And you don't have to worry about going through a project with us and it doesn't pay off, because it always pays off. And that's why we have that guarantee. And we're the only ones who do in the industry. So let's start off with, what is the SAMOSA Act? Where does it come from? So essentially, it like all federal bills, they come up with catchy names for it. And this one is the Strengthening Agency Management and Oversight of Software Assets Act. And you can remember this SAMOSA for short. It is a bipartisan bill, and that's what's one of the most important things to remember about this, is that this is not anything that has strong political implications on either side. Both Republicans and Democrats are interested in government efficiency. And of course, as you can imagine, with Trump being elected and that being one of his big campaign pitches, with Elon Musk being appointed the head of Doge agency, whatever that means, we don't know any more than you do. But obviously, that means there's a big push for government efficiency. Now, this bill has already passed the House. It passed last year, and it is expected to pass the Senate this year. It didn't quite make it through last year. But everyone is expecting it to pass this Senate session, again, because it has strong bipartisan support. Nobody's really against that. Nobody's going to vote against government efficiency. So it's very likely this bill will become law sooner than later. And if you're already here trying to learn about it, you are ahead of the game. So essentially, what's it trying to do? It's essentially requiring federal agencies to act more like their commercial counterparts and conduct comprehensive reviews of the software they have, their inventories, their entitlements, what it's costing, what kind of contracts they have, and interoperability. And essentially, it's telling affected federal agencies, you got to go develop a plan. You need to report back to us and tell us how you will plan on being in compliance with the SAMOSA Act, how you plan on being cost effective, how you plan restricting your users from using unauthorized software, all the basics that really has been the standard in commercial industry for many years now. The person in charge of implementing it is the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB. And essentially, they need to establish a process for defining the common terms so that we're all at least know we're talking about the same thing. Let me give you a common example. One of those terms is called shelfware. So if you've never heard the term shelfware before, it essentially means something you bought and then you put it up on the shelf and never used it. So essentially, it means software you've never used. So that's the kind of terminology you're going to come across when it comes to software license efficiency. And essentially, it's going to require the GAO, to report on what are the government-wide trends in implementing what the bill is saying you have to do. So I said it is under current session with the Senate, and they are hoping, it was amended slightly by Homeland Security, and they're looking to save about $5 billion annually, to give you an idea. So essentially, what are the details of the SAMOSA Act? Well, they're trying to improve federal software asset management. And so what does that mean? Well, they're looking to reduce wasteful spending on software licenses by looking for things where things are being purchased redundantly or unnecessarily. And what I mean by that is we've seen this where multiple silos with even a single government agency can be so independent from each other that they will go to the same vendor and buy the same software. And you're not going to get as good of a deal. If you have 10 little groups that are all buying 1,000 licenses a piece, well, you're never going to get as good of a deal as if you were one group buying 10,000 licenses. And that's the kind of thing that the SAMOSA Act is trying to fix. And it wants to also put in place transparency so that when the GAO goes to these different federal organizations, it can say, okay, show me how you're being compliant. Show me in an organized way. Don't just tell me you're compliant. Give me reports. Let me look at details. So essentially, that's what they're looking to do. And they're just basically looking to streamline the government contracts with these different organizations. Because as you can imagine, if you are a big organization, I'm going to use IBM as an example, it benefits. If I'm IBM, I don't want the government getting its act together. I want to divide and conquer. I want to sell every one of these little government agencies a handful of licenses at a very expensive price. The last thing I want them to do is all get together and leverage their weight against me, because they haven't before, because there was no need, because it wasn't their money. And that's one of the things that this act is trying to address. When it's a commercial business, well, the commercial entity has a real strong focus in keeping its costs down. Whereas the governmental agencies haven't had as much pressure. Of course, you have budgets. We all have budgets. I know that. But there just hasn't been as much of a push to fix these types of problems. And that's what this bill is looking to essentially fix and improve. They're also hoping to get some extra cybersecurity out of it. I think the theory there is one large entity is easier to keep cybersecurity on than many little ones. I'm not a cybersecurity expert. I can just tell you that's part of what they've announced they want to do. They're looking to standardize, best practices, decrease waste. And they're, again, like I just said, they're looking to increase the power of the federal government and their agencies to negotiate against these vendors. And it's not just on cost, it's also going to be on terms and conditions. It's going to be on lengths of contract. It's going to be what happens if you go out of compliance. And right now, most federal agencies don't realize that they have the power to get special terms and conditions that most organizations wouldn't be able to get. But because they're not really looking into it, because it's not part of their job, and they, everybody's got enough to do, they don't need any extra on their plate. It hasn't been looked into as much at the federal level. So essentially what they're going to want you to do is they're trying to develop a government-wide strategy to modernize all of their software negotiation and procurement, and essentially also avoid audits. And we'll talk about audits in a second, how audits can trip you up in this whole process. And I don't mean federal government audits, I mean audits by the software company. So just to be clear here, your federal agency can obviously audit you. Your parent organization can audit your usage, but software vendors can also audit you. In their contracts, they have things that say, if you use things you're not supposed to use, if you use them in ways you're not supposed to use them, if you use them in places you're not supposed to use them, they can come after you and they can call you up and say you're out of compliance and you could owe them a lot of money. And that's going to push you in the opposite direction. You're looking to spend less money, not more, but we'll get into that in a second. So this isn't out of nowhere. This is essentially the predecessor of the Megabyte Act, which was passed in 2016, which sort of got this ball rolling. It sort of put this on the radar of government institutions. And right now, what they're hoping with the the message of the passage of the SAMOSA Act, they're looking to save 30% of the government's $100 billion annual IT budget. Now, you can imagine if you were stopped tomorrow and you got a message that said, hey, you've got to reduce your IT expenditures by 30%. What are you going to do? Are you ready for that? Are you prepared for that? Obviously, that's a big ask. How should you start preparing now? If you are a government IT manager or you're an IT executive, or especially if you're in procurement, because I want to make sure everyone is aware here, this is coming down through the financial side. This is not coming down through the IT side as much. It is the financial teams who are going to be responsible for finding the savings. And obviously, the big part of that is going to be your IT group. But that's what I want to make sure with. This is not a mandate that's being dropped on IT all by themselves. No, this is being dropped on the finance side of your teams. It is going to be your job to go help IT find those savings. So if you are a procurement person, bring your IT people into this. If you're an IT person, bring your procurement people into this because it affects both of you. Essentially, what they're going to want is a comprehensive software inventory asset. They want to know every software asset you've got. What do your contracts say you should have? That's also known as entitlements, which you're entitled to have. And what is your usage? And that's a new one. That's a big one that a lot of people haven't noticed. The usage part has flown under the radar. So it's not about just, hey, we bought this software and we got a good deal on it and we're entitled to use it. No, it's actually also, are you using it? And we find that on average, we see 30% of licenses going unused on any given product at any given vendor, just because they either bought too many, they've shrunk in size, the team is split. Sometimes it's just automation has made it so a third of the people who used to input stuff by hand, they don't need that anymore because it happens in an automated way. But that's what I'm talking about when in terms of usage. So you're going to not only have to report on what software you have, you're going to have to report on how much you're using. And they're going to ask you things like, are all your licenses being used? Do your users log in? So questions you may have never had before. So if you're an IT team, you need to be prepared to provide that kind of information to your finance teams because they're going to need it. And also, they're going to want a centralized tracking system. Gone are the days where you might track this by putting post-it notes on a monitor, or maybe you're thinking, okay, I do this now. I have Bill's got an Excel sheet on his computer that tracks everything. That's not going to be good enough anymore. They're going to want some, enterprise level systems that track all of these types of things. And if you don't have something like that, well, you're going to be in trouble. The other part of that is automated. Is that my next slide? No, it's this slide. Is the automated, recording of it, the automated tracking. So if your process now is, hey, I send a guy, he goes into a server and he remotes in and he runs some command line and spits out some numbers and he jots them on a napkin, and no, that's not going to be good enough anymore. You're going to need to have a real system of software asset management tracking. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to go out and buy a tool. You don't have to go buy some off-the-shelf tool that does these things, because honestly, most of those tools aren't going to do the job. But you got to have something, and it's got to be robust. You're going to need to evaluate, how do you purchase now? What are your procurement processes? What do you focus on? Do you have any focus on consolidating licenses? Are you adopting enterprise license agreements, also known as ELAs? An enterprise license agreement is when an organization tells the vendor, let's just use IBM again, hey, stop talking to all these people at my company. From now on, you talk to this person and these two people on their team, and we're going to negotiate an enterprise level license, enterprise contract for the entire agency. No more dividing and conquering us. So that's essentially what an ELA is, and that's what you're going to be directed to start using if you haven't already. The other terms you might see, ULA, there's a couple different versions. They usually end with LA. And like I said, you're going to need to develop a software asset management program that aligns with the SAMOSA requirements. That's governance, that's contracts, that's finance, inventory, all of those things. And you're going to need to establish a robust license management policy. And again, it says automated tools. Now, these things could be like scripts. It doesn't have to be, like I said, you don't need to buy flagship commercial tools that are supposedly connect to your system. A lot of times that's not worth it anyway. They're more trouble than they're worth half the time because of firewalls and security issues. So, but you do have to have some sort of robust system. So maybe an internal database, something like that. And you're going to need modernization plans. And that's going to include other things maybe you haven't done before, like talking about how you're restricting unauthorized acquisitions. Let me give you an example of what I mean by an unauthorized acquisition. We had a client who, at some point, they ran out of licenses for their users. I believe it was a HR system. And part of their process when they onboarded new users was the IT department went out, called the company, purchased another license or 2 or 10 for how many people they were onboarding. And great, handed out the licenses, everything went well. but then the agency redid its contracts. They renewed their contract. They bought like 1,000 more licenses. Well, nobody told the IT guys. Nobody told the junior IT guy whose job was to provision new people. His process still said buy license every time I onboard somebody. So they bought hundreds of new licenses they didn't need. They already had, but they were talking right past each other. And that's what I mean by unauthorized acquisitions. And you'd be surprised. Most of these vendors, unless they're told don't sell to anyone but me, they'd be more than happy to charge any credit card, any purchase order. They don't care. You want to buy it? It's not the vendor's job to know if the junior IT guy is allowed to buy licenses. No, he shows up with money, he's going to be allowed to buy licenses unless you have an agreement that doesn't allow that. You're going to need automated software discovery tools. And what I mean by that is you're going to need tools or scripts, something like that, that's going to be able to go in and ping a server and say, hey, Mr. Server, what do you have installed on you? Is there anything I care about? So things like that. It's not going to be, like I said earlier, it can't be just one guy writing in command prompt stuff because he's a programmer and he knows what to write. No, it's going to be more automated than that. And you got to prepare detailed reporting mechanism, again, on that usage, on that compliance, and to do with all the reporting that they're going to detail once it gets passed. And they're, like I said, they're going to want you to invest in training programs and education on how and when to talk to a software vendor, what to say to them, what not to say to them, what to never say to them, because it can have very bad things that happen. And for some organizations, this is going to be a cultural shift. They're fully aware of that. It's a new level of accountability. Now, I know some of you are really on top of the ball on this. I'm sure others of you at my webinar are going, we don't do anything like that right now. How the hell are we supposed to start? From what we've talked to different agencies, it's a wide range. There's people who are really prepared, and there's people who are completely unprepared. We're finding most people fall somewhere in the middle. And again, as part of the act, it says to consider specialized consultants or vendors who have experience doing this exact thing for large federal agencies. And that's very important. One of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to hire some guy who went into business 6 months ago, who's a one-man shop, who essentially says, oh yeah, I could do this project, and he's completely overwhelmed and the whole thing crashes and burns. You're going to need somebody who's done this at the level that a federal government agency requires. So let me talk to you about how we've done that, for example. So we previously worked for the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services. We ended up saving them about $243 million. So we were contacted originally to work with their Oracle team, and we eventually went on to work with their IBM and their Microsoft teams as well. And essentially, they were where a lot of you are now. They didn't have any centralized purchasing policies. They didn't have any teams for it. They had multiple groups buying multiple things from multiple sales reps at, all over the place. It was just the way things went. It was the way it had always been. Nobody was really concerned about it. So we started helping them with their Oracle stuff. And essentially, we went in, we do what we standardized do for most commercial clients. We help them eliminate any of their out of compliance issues. We work with them on, hey, we're going to migrate to this new system. This is what would be in compliance. This is what would not. We help them train to implement best practices for software subscriptions. Get rid of the shelfware, things they're not using. Every company has something somewhere. Some rep talked somebody into buying something that never got implemented or turns out wasn't the right fit. It's no big deal. We all have them. I have shelfware. I'll be the first to admit. But it's time that the government's going to make you actually address that, not kind of just forget about it. And one of the things we helped them do was get some bespoke terms and conditions, which really favored them and how they do business. And we helped them improve their RFP process, which again is part of the act. Essentially, putting out bids for certain things in ways you maybe never had to put out a bid for something before. Now, that was the Oracle team, and the Microsoft team went very similar, and they did everything right. But before we got involved with the IBM team, they also tried to essentially get this wrong. This was a full sort of like CMS-wide initiative. So the IBM team also tried to go out and do all the things I just said. Reduce out of compliance issues, save on costs, et cetera, all those types of things. But what happened was we weren't working with them at the time. The CMS group, whatever they did, they managed to trigger, the IBM group at CMS, as they were working, trying to understand what they had and what they were supposed to have and things like that, they were audited by IBM. And that is a frequent occurrence you will see with organizations who don't have practice with this and they don't have any outside help. because it's very easy to trigger a software audit on yourself without even realizing you're doing it. It's super easy. If I didn't know, if I had learned from Miro here, I would probably do it myself. But just to give you an example, the way you might trigger an audit is, you might be looking to reduce some, shelfware. You might be looking to reduce some things you're not using. When you renew for less licenses. Well, one of the things, I'm not saying CMS did this because we weren't working with them at the time, but one of the most frequent ways people will trigger themselves to get an audit is they might call up their vendor and say, hey, do I have a license to use the ERP system? What about this feature and that feature? Oh, okay, great, thanks. Doesn't really matter what the answer was. What's going to happen is these vendors, there are people who pick up the phone, they're trained to listen for those types of questions. So when they go look and they say, oh no, you don't have a license for that. Well, the very next thing they're going to do is they're going to look up your system because they have all the information on it, and they're going to see if you're using that feature. And if you are, guess what? You just got audited. And out of compliance issues can be, like I said, range in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It is staggering. And it's very easy to go out of compliance. A lot of these vendors, they'll go let you download $1 million products. Yeah, just tell us your name, tell us where you work. Okay, hit download. Oh, good, you're fine. Here you go. You can start using it. And then a month later, they send you a bill for it, or they send you a notice that says you are out of compliance. So it is hugely important that when you start this process, don't start off by shooting yourself in the foot. You don't start off because your initial instinct might be to do the wrong things. And the last thing you want is when you start in a process of saving money and going after these vendors and chasing them down, trying to get better deals. The last thing you want is to be immediately put on defense, and all of a sudden you're not spending less money, you're spending more money. Because now all of a sudden the vendor wants compliance fees, it wants back fees. And one of the things they might tell you, oh yeah, all those products you were thinking about dropping, you're not dropping any of it. You're not dropping any licenses because that's going to be part of our audit settlement is you keep everything you have and you buy more. And that's not what any of us want. So that's my big warning. That's one of the big takeaways I want you guys to get from here, which time to have a few more minutes, is that while you go through this efficiency process, there are traps that you could fall into if you try to go it alone and don't work with the experts. And I just mentioned a couple of things. And eventually, like I said, we saved them about $243 million. And the quote we got from one of their group directors was, Miro did an A+ job, saves us $1 million on our software licensing. Their deep level of expertise was something our other vendors couldn't match. Miro not only helped us fix our issues, but also taught us how to avoid them in the future. And that's one of the things we're so happy with is we try to teach you how to avoid these so they never happen again. And you can navigate this type of thing on your own in the future. Just to give you an idea of who we are, we've done this for many organizations, city, state, everything. You can see different counties, different groups, New York City, Argonne National Laboratory. We work with multiple government agencies. We know what it's like working with public entities. Some of our peers, we believe, only do commercial, but we're not one of them. We also do public as well. We also, of course, are trusted by some of the biggest commercial clients in the world. If you forgive me for just dropping a few logos here, you can obviously see we do a lot of good work for a lot of organizations. And with that, we did get some questions during the registration process. And one of them was, and I will leave my contact info up here, is who exactly does the SAMOSA Act apply to? And the answer is it applies to your CFO. Your CFO is the one who is being legally held responsible for implementing the SAMOSA Act at their agencies. Now, it's important because most people seem to think it's the CIO. It is not. It is your CFO. And that is why I said procurement, this is primarily landing in your lap. And best to be prepared for it early. Another question we got during our process, and again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the question box and I will get to them after I get to these canned questions. Some of you I know had some questions and the answer is it depends, or we would rather speak with you privately. So I'm just kind of answering more of the generic ones. Another one is what does SAM stand for? And that's Software Asset Management. And finally, what the other question I think what I can say here is what's the difference between ELA and a ULA? Not much. It's essentially just Oracle, for example, uses the term ULA. It stands for Unlimited License Agreement. It's not actually unlimited, so don't think that. Doesn't mean you can have everything. And ELA is the more generic term that means Enterprise License Agreement. Now, if you have any other questions that anyone would like to ask, we can answer them today. If not, I'll give you another minute. If you would like to contact us and understand more about how you can get started working on the SAMOSA Act, you can contact us at miroconsulting.com on the web. You can also contact us. You can contact my director of sales, Steve Adler, at sadler@miroconsulting.com. His phone number is behind a Zoom box, and he is at 732-738-8511, extension 1207. Again, if you have any further questions, please contact us. But that ends today's webinar. Have a great day and good luck with your compliance needs.